Because Shinto is all about humans achieving harmony within nature, environmentalism plays a big part in Miyazaki's recurrent themes. He feels people are meant to live in nature and has stated, "I look forward to when developers go bankrupt, Japan gets poorer, and the wild grasses take over."
You know what else he probably hates?
What?
Futuristic white classrooms.
Probably. All right, moving on. Environmentalism is the central theme of Princess Mononoke, a story that follows a young warrior who becomes involved in a struggle between forest gods and the humans who consume its resources. Miyazaki said his goal was to portray the very beginnings of the seemingly insoluble conflict between the natural world and modern industrial civilization. And environmentalism even plays into Spirited Away in the scene depicting what they think is a stink spirit coming to the bathhouse.
Look, a valued customer. Welcome to our baths. Then take the nice customer's money.
Yes, ma'am. This way.
Turns out dude isn't a stink spirit, but a powerful river who's become so polluted that needs the help of the bathhouse to purify himself and restore his energy.
Stink spirit? That must be what space brain is.
Settle down, robot.
That hurts my feelings.
Hashtag space brain stinks.
Shh, zip it. Also, it's interesting to note that many of the villains in Miyazaki films attempt to dominate nature in order to gain political power, and this always has disastrous results. Pixar leader and Toy Story director John Lasseter has called Miyazaki the world's greatest living animator. Miyazaki signed a distribution deal with Disney in 1997. Lasseter oversees the English language dubs for Studio Ghibli's American releases. The fact that he's able to recruit A-list talent like Christian Bale and Liam Neeson as voice talent speaks volumes about the regard for Miyazaki in Hollywood. It's important to note that Disney has no creative control over Studio Ghibli, and Miyazaki is famously protective of merchandising rights as well. When Hollywood heavyweight Harvey Weinstein wanted Princess Mononoke edited, one of Miyazaki's producers mailed Weinstein a samurai sword with a note that read, "No cuts."
Oh wow, a samurai sword.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. Telling Harvey Weinstein no is something that not many people have ever gotten away with. Pacifism is another one of Miyazaki's reoccurring themes because dude hates war and goes out of his way to create stories that illustrate the foolishness of war. In fact, he was born 3 years before the end of World War II and grew up witnessing the devastation of war firsthand. His particular distaste for the Iraq War in 2003 inspired Howl's Moving Castle, depicting wizards being recruited to fight in a war in which they don't even know what they're fighting for. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind also has strong pacifist themes in which a girl is willing to sacrifice her life in order to find peace between humans and the giant angry insects who are a direct product of man's poisoning of their environment from an ancient war. One thing I personally love about Miyazaki is his portrayal of female characters. 9 of his 13 films have female leads where he often explores their coming-of-age transition from innocence to responsibility. His female characters are never sexually objectified and instead are independent, complex people with their own hopes and fears who don't inhabit narrow gender roles and are not looking to marry any prince. Instead, they solve their own problems.
That sounds like a strike against Disney princesses.
Well, it is. Miyazaki himself hates the title of being called the Walt Disney of Japan because he feels that the only thing his films have in common with Disney films is that they're animated and are targeted towards children.
They call you the Japanese Disney, and I wonder, how do you feel about that?
あんまり嬉しくありません。
I'm not very happy about it. Disney is a producer, but he's not a director.
For example, Kiki from Kiki's Delivery Service is a 13-year-old witch going through a rite of passage, experiencing trials and tribulations of learning to be an independent person while establishing herself in an unfamiliar town. Chihiro of Spirited Away must overcome her fear of the unknown by using her bravery, cleverness, and hard work to redeem her trapped parents. San from Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa from Nausicaa Valley of the Wind are both leaders who seek to restore a balance between man and nature, with San having to overcome her hatred of man and Nausicaa willingly laying down her life for peace. And even his female villains are shown as complex people rather than cartoonishly evil. For example, Lady Eboshi of Princess Mononoke may be disturbing the balance of nature with her industrial expansion, but she's only doing what she thinks is right for her people who depend on her, rescuing lepers as well as women from prostitution through employment at her iron foundry. Another thing I love is how he doesn't force a romance on his female characters. Many of them find inspiration from the young men in their lives, but do not always end up together romantically. Kiki and Tambo never kiss, San and Ashitaka go their separate ways, and I respect that. Another motif that is ever present in his films is flight. Growing up around aeronautic engineers sparked a lifelong obsession with flight that could be seen throughout his films, most notably in Porco Rosso and The Wind Rises, two movies that not only predominantly feature flight, but also the nuts and bolts machinations behind aeronautics. In fact, Ponyo, Princess Mononoke, and The Castle of Cagliostro are his only films that do not include a flying sequence.
So what's the deal with flying in his movies about?
Well, Robot, it may be because the act of flight is a technical engineering challenge that requires meticulous calculation and precise execution, which is very similar to the rigorous process of hand-drawn animation that also requires meticulous calculation and precise execution.
Oh.
Also, metaphorically speaking, the idea of flight is linked with freedom, gaining a larger perspective, and the use of imagination, as well as a sense of wonder and awe. All things important to Miyazaki that he works to transmit to audiences through his films. The last thing I want to talk about is Ma.
Ma?
A theme that goes mostly unnoticed, but that is omnipresent in all of Miyazaki's films, is something that the Japanese call ma, which is something like negative space or a pause for thought, emptiness, yen, whatever you want to call it.
Empty?
And in all his movies, you will find moments of quiet where nothing is seemingly happening. Roger Ebert once said of Miyazaki films, "Instead of every movement being dictated by the story, sometimes people will just sit for a moment, or they'll sigh, or look in a running stream, or do something extra, not to advance the story, but only to give a sense of time and place and who they are." This is because Miyazaki is concerned with his art imitating life. He's concerned with the quiet contemplative moments that we all experience, finding the spiritual in solitude, and how the only way to recognize the magic in everyday life is to slow down.
Teacher, how do you feel about the decline of hand-drawn animation?
Well, Space Brain, I feel like the decline of hand-drawn animation is kind of sad. Like, as an artist, as somebody who likes to just draw on a piece of paper, I like seeing other people drawing on tons of pieces of paper and then putting them together and bringing something to life, and I think that's so magical and so special, and I'm sad to see it go. In 2014, Miyazaki received an honorary Oscar. In his acceptance speech through a translator, he said he felt lucky to have been able to participate in the last era where we can make films with paper, pencils, and film. Fun fact, there's an asteroid named after Hayao Miyazaki.
What's with all these guys having asteroids?
I don't know, Robot, but I want to know when I get my asteroid. Hayao Miyazaki isn't only one of the world's greatest animators, he's a keen observer of the human condition. His works are intent on creating a positive vision, inspiring audiences around the world towards finding balance in an increasingly unbalanced world. And as Hayao Miyazaki once said about his works, "I wanted to convey the message to children that life is worth living." This message has not changed. All right, class, now it's time for your homework assignment. First of all, watch all of the films. Thanks to his distribution with Disney, you can dive right into Miyazaki works pretty easily with the 12-disc Blu-ray set, The Collected Works of Hayao Miyazaki, although beware, there are no special features. Also, I highly recommend checking out the documentary, The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, as it follows Miyazaki in a year-long run up to the release of 2 Studio Ghibli films.
How much do you think it would cost if I bought everything you recommend on this show?
It'll cost you a pretty penny. Join us next time on Greater Creators, where we're going to discuss the works of other